All right, everybody. So I'm going to come down here because I'm a bit vertically challenged and those things don't really work for me. So before I get into the nuts and bolts of clinical research, I want to tell you a little bit about myself and why I'm here. So I'm an executive director at PPD, a division of Thermo Fisher. I work primarily in neurosciences, and my job, my everyday job, is to look at the up-and-coming trends, where the industries are going, and to make investments in those up-and-coming trends in the way of people and equipment and things around patients and reducing burden reducing burden for patients and sites. So that's my primary responsibility. I've been in the industry for 23 years across biotech, biopharma, and the CRO world. I am passionate about rare diseases, and I have had the pleasure of being part of two breakthrough therapies, one in lysosomal acid lipase deficiency and the other in idiopathic recurrent pericarditis. I am very passionate about the CMT space, and it has been amazing to watch the progress over the last couple of years, knowing that these breakthroughs are happening, and some of these breakthroughs have started in this room. So I want you to take that with you as you go home later today. Breakthroughs are happening. Now, my passion for rare disease extends well past the boardroom, writing clinical trial protocols, running programs. My true passion is the passion I have as a mother and a wife and a caregiver of loved ones living with CMT. So this is my family. There I am. There's my son, MJ, my daughter, Lily, and my husband, Gregory. And this is about 6 weeks ago. We were in Sciacca, Sicily. That's where my husband's family's from. And this was my daughter's sweet 16. And if you had asked me 12 years ago about this day, I don't think I could have imagined it. Because it was about 12 years ago that we found out that we were one of the families affected with CMT. Now, our diagnosis journey is probably very similar to a lot of you in this room. We found out that we were on this path when my father-in-law, who is a mechanic, he was in his late 50s, started dropping his tools at work. They just fall out of his hand. He had been a mechanic for 30 years, never had any problems, and all of a sudden he couldn't do what he was doing anymore. And so he went to countless neurologists. And at the end, all they could tell him, we think you have some form of peripheral neuropathy. We're not sure what it is, though. Fast forward a couple of years later, I give birth to my wonderful daughter, Lily. And from birth, I could tell something just wasn't right. She started tripping. She wasn't meeting her milestones. And I thought, this can't be unrelated. So, against the advice of my pediatrician, I took her to an MDA care center in the Bronx. My intuition kicked in. I knew something was wrong. And there, I heard, for the very first time, this funny-sounding disease, Charcot-Marie-Tooth. And I thought, oh, this makes sense. This makes so much sense. And over the following months, my husband was diagnosed, my daughter was diagnosed, his father was diagnosed, his sister was diagnosed, and later, my future niece was diagnosed. A whole family of people living with CMT who had never had any idea that the symptoms that they were having were due to this disease. Now, let's focus on my wonderful husband for a minute. His name is Gregory, and he is a teacher. He teaches in the Bronx. He's a full-time teacher, but he didn't used to be a teacher. He used to be a researcher. He was actually on the discovery team for rilonacept at Regeneron. And he left the field because he could no longer pipette in the laboratory. Now, he had no idea that this was the reason that CMT was behind it. And he would hide behind, I want to have some resolve, so I'm going to go be a teacher. But that was really the first symptom he had ever had. But up till that point, nothing really remarkable for us to note. He was diagnosed in 2012 when my daughter was diagnosed, and we have a long family history of CMT now that we know. And as a teacher and a former researcher, he was frustrated that there was no treatments out there for him. So of course, being an Italian man from Brooklyn, he said, what is your company doing about this? What are you guys going to do? You talk to all these pharma companies. What are we going to do here? I didn't have an answer, and nobody in the clinic had an answer. But I think today, over the last couple of days, we're starting to get those answers. He is an active member of the CMT community. He wanted to be here today, but he's a school teacher, couldn't make it up here. And he has participated in a phase 3 trial. So I'm going to walk you through his path on the in clinical trials, and hopefully it will help. Okay, so clinical research. Well, at its fundamental, clinical research means a comprehensive study of therapies aimed at helping discover cures for a myriad of diseases, or treatments for a myriad of diseases. There are 5 phases of clinical research trials that these therapies need to go through. Preclinical, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4 post-marketing studies. So I'm going to break it down a little bit. I'm going to go a little fast, though. Preclinical laboratory studies, well, those are your animal studies. That's what we've been talking about a lot here today. And they provide information on dosing and toxicity. If we look at a candidate and we think we can move it to phase 1, that's where we see it in humans for the first time. Okay? So that's your first in human studies. Typically, they're in healthy individuals, but in some cases, we will do a phase 1 study in patients. Okay, and they're there to evaluate safety and to gather information about how the drug is going to react in the human body. They're smaller studies and they run really fast. So if we get enough data from phase 1 and we think this is a good candidate, we're going to move it to phase 2. These studies are a little larger, they're a little longer, and they're to focus on further looking at the evaluation of safety, to monitor any side effects, to look at the dosing levels. We'll do multiple dosing arms, and then to see if the drug is effective. We start that journey in efficacy at that point. We're moved forward to phase 3. This is where my husband got his moment to shine. Phase 3 studies are pivotal studies. They're registrational, and this is what we put forward along with all the other data from the other trials to the FDA for approval. They are large studies. They tend to run over multiple years, and they're focused on confirming efficacy and continuing monitoring safety. My husband was in a study. It was a placebo randomized controlled study with PXT3003, the Farnex study. And then moving forward, if you go to FDA approval, you gather all that data together, and Dr. Winton's going to talk a bit about what that looks like, why it takes so long, how important the inclusion-exclusion criteria, all of that is in making a decision moving forward into that approval space. Once we gain FDA approval, we move into phase 4 studies. That's post-marketing safety studies, and that's to gather further information from a safety, efficacy standpoint, how it looks in different populations, and what the long-term side effects are of the drug use. So here's a patient pathway through clinical trials. I'm going to go real fast on this one, but the first thing to look at is you have to have the diagnosis of the disease for the most part. Unless you're in a healthy normal study, you have to be diagnosed. And in some cases, you will be diagnosed as part of the clinical trial, but that's your first step. So we all know Gregory had CMT. So the next step is the referral process. And that's where you've got to get referred to that clinical study, right? And there's many different roads to get a referral, right? You can have your primary physician refer you to a clinical trial. You can have access to different trials through different websites by the biopharma teams, the biotech teams. They typically have a website that will have their trials listed. They might be advertising on a screener or pre-screener. ClinTrials.gov will list all of the trials that are out there. And then, of course, patient advocacy groups who tend to have a list of of trials that are ongoing at any given time. My husband's pathway was through his neurologist, who was also would be his principal investigator. So we didn't have to go that far, and he made it very clear at his first visit years ago, I want to be in a clinical trial. So when this opportunity came up, he was ready and willing to be part of it. Then you go through pre-screening. You go through those, the doctor will look at your initial records and say, okay, I think you might be a good fit, and they'll have a conversation with you about that study. It's a very short conversation. It's usually a few minutes long. Hey, do you think you might want to be part of this? And you say yes, you move on to the informed consent phase. Now this can be a long visit, and so I want to, if you've not been through one, it's a very important visit. In gene therapy studies, it could be almost a full day, if not longer. But you have to go through your participation rights, that it's voluntary, that you can withdraw at any time, what the purposes of the study are, any risks or benefits from the study, all the study visits so that you know your commitment. For my husband, it was super important to know what his commitment was going to be because he's a school teacher. He couldn't take that much time out. And then confidentiality. What are they going to do with your data? How are they going to protect your identity? All of that's wrapped up into that informed consent process. It's probably one of the most important visits that you have. If you get confused at any time, ask questions during informed consent. And if you want, what we did, we took the informed consent home. We reviewed it at home, and then we went back and signed it. Then you move on to the screening visit, and this is where you undergo all your tests to determine whether or not you can be included or you'll be excluded from the clinical trial. Typically, there are physical assessments, there might be some patient-reported outcomes, so questionnaires, blood work is all done, and they'll look through a checklist and they'll either say, well, they're a good fit, Gregory's a great fit for this PXT3003 study, or maybe he just doesn't meet the criteria and we'll have to pass this on for next time. And so at that point, you get the go, no-go to move on to what is the randomization or enrollment visit, and that's when you'll be put into a group. Now, most studies are randomized controlled trials, so you'll be put into potentially multiple dose arms, or you could be randomized to standard of care or placebo. It just really depends on the study. And then once you go through that, you're participating in the trial. Trial participation looks different across many different programs. It could be all in clinic. It could be over, months. It could be in clinic and at your home. It could be in clinic at your home and have a mobile site that comes to your house. There's all different methods to do clinical trial work. And then at the end, you'll have an end of study visit and you'll move off the study. So again, here's just some resources for you when you're thinking about going into the clinical trial world. Start with your neurologist, your centers of excellence, your care centers. The biopharmas and biotech companies are great resources. Your patient advocacy groups and clinicaltrials.gov for resources. And just, again, going back to the breakthroughs are happening. My husband decided to be in a clinical research trial well before there was one. And there's different reasons why people want to do it. Some want to be in a clinical research study because they want access to cutting new medicines. Others want to be in it because they want access to experts in the field. Some just want to do something good for their community. And then others still just want to learn more about their disease. My husband did it because he wants to be part of the revolution that will bring cutting-edge cures to his daughter and his niece in their generation. And that's it. Breakthroughs are happening. If you have any questions, find me afterwards. I'm absolutely would love to answer any questions and give you the debrief of what it's like to be in a clinical trial. All right. Thank you.